Orlando. Morning of February 11th, 2024. In the bustling, slightly stifling atmosphere of Gate 34B at Orlando International Airport, people were lining up in a rush to board Flight 85 to St. Louis. Families were juggling luggage, couples exchanged final vacation smiles, and solo travelers just hoped for a quiet, uneventful flight. Renee Martin, 38, stepped up to the boarding gate. A woman with a serious face, simple attire, a small backpack slung over her shoulders, and a ticket clearly marked for Seat 12A, an emergency exit row in the middle of the plane. "Are you able to assist in case of an emergency evacuation?" the attendant asked. Renee nodded. "Yes, I understand. No problem." She entered the aircraft, fighting off a dry throat and aching fatigue. Just one short flight and she'd finally be home. But in just a few minutes, everything would fall apart. As Renee reached the middle rows, she came to a halt. Standing directly in the aisle was a boy around 10, head down, absorbed in a phone, completely blocking access to row 12. Renee leaned forward, her voice polite but firm. "Hey, sweetheart, I need to get through. Could you please move aside?" The boy didn't respond. Renee gently placed her hand on his shoulder, signaling that she needed to pass. She didn't push, didn't raise her voice. She simply needed to get to her assigned seat. She sat down, took a soft breath, and began placing her bag in the overhead bin. But she had no idea a woman was turning back toward her with fury in her eyes. Karen Holloway, 34, a single mom traveling with her 3 young children, had just finished securing her youngest in a child safety seat. She turned around just in time to see Renee step past her son. Karen's face turned bright red. Her voice pierced through the cabin. "Don't you ever touch my son." Heads turned. Renee, still buckling her seatbelt, looked up, confused. "I just asked him to move. That's all. I didn't mean anything." "You have no right to touch my child," Karen shouted, moving closer. "I'm in my assigned seat. If this isn't yours, please don't make a scene," Renee replied calmly, though her gaze was growing sharper. Just 4 seconds later, Karen's hand came flying toward Renee's face. A powerful punch sent one of Renee's teeth flying. Blood began trickling from her nose down her chin. Gasps echoed throughout the cabin. Renee fell back in her seat. A passenger yelled, "She hit her! There's blood! Someone's hurt!" Karen didn't stop. She lunged forward, grabbed Renee's hair, slapped her again, before a flight attendant and a male passenger intervened. The chaos unfolded in under a minute. Children screamed, passengers moved to the sides. The flight attendant yelled into the intercom, "Call airport police. We have an assault on board." Renee said nothing. Blood dripped from her lip. She sat up, pulled out her phone with trembling hands, her voice steady. "I've been assaulted. Notify the DA when I get to St. Louis. We have witnesses. We have video. I'm not letting this go." 5 minutes later, 3 airport officers arrived. 1 man, 2 women. They split the passengers into groups and began taking statements. Renee recounted everything. She didn't stutter. She didn't cry. "I just asked the boy to move." She turned around, screamed in my face, then attacked. "I was hit first. I want to press charges." On the other side, Karen Holloway showed no remorse. Still shouting, her face flushed and dripping sweat. "She touched my son. No one has the right. I was protecting him." One officer asked, "Did you hit her?" "I reacted. She pushed my kid," Karen snapped. But then witnesses started speaking. A flight attendant, Miss Renee, was polite, didn't raise her voice. Miss Karen turned back and hit her first. A passenger in seat 13. "I saw the blood." Karen rushed her. The other woman didn't even fight back. The officer turned to Karen, voice firm. "Miss Holloway, you are under arrest for assault. Please come with us." But the moment the handcuffs clicked on her wrists, the real storm began. They say she's just a mother protecting her child. But in the video now going viral, that mother is handcuffed, screaming, thrashing like the world's turned against her. Orlando International Airport, Gate 34B, 12 minutes after the attack. Officer Lopez, a seasoned female cop with 16 years at the airport, tightened the cuffs and read the Miranda rights word for word. "Karen Holloway, you are under arrest for assault. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Karen froze, eyes wide as if she couldn't believe what she just heard. Then she erupted. "No, I didn't do anything wrong. Don't touch me. This is abuse of power. I'm a veteran. I worked in corrections for 22 years. Karen's screams echoed through the boarding area. She struggled violently. 2 officers had to hold both her arms to escort her away. A passenger began recording with a phone. That 4-minute video, later posted on Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook, racked up over 15 million views in 48 hours. "You're lying about me. I was attacked first. I have a heart condition. Don't jerk my arm like that. Are you seeing this? They're bending my wrist. Record it. Record it." Karen kept thrashing, her feet dragging, her voice screeching as she was led to the elevator. A male officer tried to stay calm. "We don't want to hurt you, but you need to cooperate." Karen snapped. "I am cooperating. I can walk. Don't drag me like some animal." Nearby, an elderly woman holding a little girl shook her head gently. Some people just don't take responsibility for their actions anymore. Right in front of the elevator, Karen collapsed to the ground. "I can't breathe. My heart, my heart." The officers halted instantly. One called for medical, but then Karen screamed again. "Don't touch my chest. I know my rights. This is harassment." The airport medic arrived. Blood pressure, normal. Heart, normal. No signs of shock. Still, Karen kept shouting, "I'm a veteran. Desert Storm. I won't let you treat me like this." A female officer spoke gently, trying to de-escalate. "Miss Holloway, we can talk later. Right now, please cooperate so we don't disturb other passengers." Karen suddenly scoffed. "I know your type. Black cop, white cop, makes no difference." At that exact moment, a passenger uploaded the first video to TikTok. Simple caption: "Woman hits passenger then cries during arrest. Welcome to Florida." 5,000 likes in just 30 minutes. That was the spark. The storm had begun. As Karen was escorted into the airport security room, she kept screaming, "I'm not resisting. I'm not resisting. Don't twist my arm. I can walk. Don't push me. Who do you people think you are? I want to speak to a supervisor. I've worked in the system for 22 years. Another female officer quietly whispered to her colleague, "She's not just angry. She's completely losing control. We need to stay calm." And they did stay calm. But social media didn't. Online, opinions quickly split down the middle. Why are they arresting a mother for protecting her child? What about the other woman? Who knows what really happened? If she's a veteran, she should know better than to lose control. This is America's problem. No one knows how to behave in public anymore. And in the eye of that storm, Renee Martin sat quietly in the airport's medical room. Holding an ice pack, a faint smile appeared when she received a text from a contact at the district attorney's office. "Send the video and your statement. We'll take it from here." She didn't respond. She simply closed her eyes, leaned her head back against the cold airport wall, and thought, it's time someone was held accountable. Truly accountable. Karen Holloway sat in silence, wrists still red from the cuffs, cheeks flushed from rage. Her eyes were sunken, not from remorse, but from exhaustion. In front of her sat the lead investigator. A preliminary charging sheet lay on the table. Battery? Resisting an officer? Assault on a law enforcement officer? Battery on a law enforcement officer. "I need a lawyer," she said hoarsely. "I won't say another word without legal counsel." Meanwhile, in a small room on the other side of the airport, Renee Martin sat with a medic and a female officer. Her front tooth had been placed in a medical bag. Her nose swollen, her lips still bleeding. "I don't want this to get swept under the rug," Renee said. "I want to press charges, officially. I don't care who she is or if she's a veteran." She pulled out her phone and opened her messaging app. "I work with the St. Louis DA's office. This is my representative." On social media, the storm was now a hurricane. From the original clip of Karen thrashing during her arrest, the internet had now split into 2 deeply polarized sides. Pro-Karen camp? She's a mother. Someone touched her kid. Anyone would react. PTSD after war is real. The cops handled it poorly. Pro-Renee and law enforcement camp? She assaulted someone in front of children. You're a veteran? Then act like it. This was violence, not self-defense. If the victim wasn't black, would people still be defending her? A young journalist named Carlos Devine, working for the Independent Flame, immediately began investigating. He saw this as more than just a fight on a plane. It was a lens into how our system handles public conflict. Carlos reached out to the passenger who recorded the original video. They agreed to share the full version, 7 minutes long, showing Renee sitting calmly and Karen launching the attack. The truth started coming into focus. Back in the interview room, a detective asked Karen, "You said you worked in corrections for 22 years. You know better than anyone which actions cross the line, so why today?" Karen cut in, voice sharp, "Because I'm tired. Tired of being disrespected, tired of people touching my child, speaking to me like I'm beneath them." She paused, eyes staring into the distance. "I'm not a monster. But what would you do if someone touched your child, when you've spent your whole life being pushed aside and ignored?" Karen wasn't wrong about being tired, but exhaustion does not excuse violence. Her public defender, Mr. Harris, entered the room and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Miss Holloway, if you want any chance of defending yourself, let me do the talking." Karen nodded, her eyes still flickered with tension. Not the hysteria from earlier, but something else. A quiet war between guilt and instinct. Meanwhile, Renee received a call. "We've reviewed the file, Renee," the prosecutor's voice came through. "We'll move forward. But I need to ask, are you truly ready to take this to court? The media might dig. You could face backlash." Renee paused. "I'm not a celebrity, but I've seen too many victims stay silent and get ignored. I'm going all the way." At that moment, on Twitter X, hashtags began trending. Number 12 incident, protect passengers, mom or menace. The question was no longer, who hit whom? It had become, how do we deal with public conflict when emotions overpower reason? February 26, 2024, Orange County Courthouse, Florida. The courtroom was packed, even though it was only the preliminary hearing. News crews had set up cameras early that morning. An older man held a sign, "Justice for mothers, not monsters." A group of college students held another, "Accountability matters. Violence is not maternal." The courtroom doors opened. Renee Martin walked in, wearing a crisp white blouse, her hair neatly tied back. The swelling on her nose was still visible. She moved calmly, eyes focused straight ahead, without smiling or looking around. She took her seat at the plaintiff's table. Her eyes didn't shine from viral fame, but from quiet determination. Karen Holloway entered through a side door. Wearing a gray jacket, hair in a tight bun, face expressionless. But her eyes said everything. Tension, defiance, unease. Beside her stood Attorney Harris, the only person she'd been willing to listen to since the arrest. The two women never made eye contact. Not once. Judge Jackson, a middle-aged black woman with 30 years of experience handling public violence cases, banged the gavel. Case number 2024-1741. The State of Florida versus by Karen Holloway on charges of battery, resisting arrest, and battery on a law enforcement officer. Today is the initial hearing. No verdict will be issued. We are here to determine the validity of the charges and hear motions from both sides. The prosecutor went first. A composed young man stood, file in hand. "We intend to prove that the defendant assaulted the plaintiff deliberately, without provocation, caused significant physical injury, and violently resisted lawful arrest. The existing video confirms these actions." He held up a phone. The now viral 7-minute clip, cut from the full version, was submitted into evidence. This case is about behavior and consequences. The physical harm, the emotional trauma, and the broader threat to public safety. Attorney Harris stood next. "Your Honor, my client is a single mother, a Gulf War veteran, with a clean record and no prior offenses. At the time of the incident, she was traveling alone with 3 children after a long, exhausting trip, under immense stress and without proper support. She did not act with malice. It was a momentary emotional reaction, a mother's instinct upon seeing someone touch her child." Renee subtly furrowed her brow at the word instinct. She said nothing, but the cameras caught that look. It said everything. The judge turned to Renee. "Miss Martin, would you like to address the court?" Renee stood. The room fell completely silent. "I'm not here to destroy a mother, but I can't let violence be excused by motherhood. I've seen too many women like me get hit, get humiliated, and then stay silent. I choose not to be silent. I didn't insult anyone. I politely asked a child to move, and for that I lost a tooth and almost lost faith in how this society delivers justice. No applause, no objections." Her final sentence echoed in the breathless courtroom. Karen didn't look up, but her fists were clenched tight. Attorney Harris placed a hand gently on hers, as if to hold back the storm rising in her eyes. The judge nodded and ruled. After reviewing the evidence, testimony, and seriousness of the events, The court finds sufficient grounds to proceed with a formal trial. A full trial will be held on March 28th. In the meantime, the defendant is released on bail, with strict conditions. No contact with the plaintiff, no public statements regarding the case, and mandatory psychological evaluation. Karen gave a faint nod, but as she walked out of the courtroom she muttered something, too quiet to make it into the official record, but loud enough for a nearby reporter to hear. "I'll tell my side of the story. No one gets to control the narrative forever." St. Louis, Missouri, Southside Motel Unit. Karen Holloway set a bag of groceries on the table. Her 3 children ran out to greet her. The apartment was cramped but clean, faded blue wallpaper, old family photos, one of her in uniform. She was still a mother, still cooking, still trimming nails, reading bedtime stories, but inside her, a quiet storm raged, unrelenting. 2004, Ramadi, Iraq. Karen was a combat medic. Her unit's vehicle was ambushed. A close friend, a fellow soldier, was critically injured. Karen pulled him from the wreckage, blood covering her arms. He didn't survive. She never forgot the look in his eyes before they closed, a mix of gratitude and despair. Karen returned to the U.S. in 2005 with an honorary medal and a diagnosis of mild PTSD that she never treated. 2012, her husband left. She became a single mother to 3 children, working night shifts at the local correctional facility, juggling tuition fees, electric bills, and forced smiles in front of her kids. But inside, Karen stopped sleeping, flinched at the sound of metal, grew tense when anyone got too close to her kids at the grocery store. "I stood on a battlefield and still had to apologize for yelling at someone not to touch my child." From a journal entry no one had ever read. Present day, early March 2024. Karen was living temporarily in St. Louis while awaiting trial. She refused to speak to the media, but the media never stopped speaking about her. Meanwhile, Renee Martin had become a familiar face on morning talk shows, invited to share her story as the woman attacked on a plane, but always kept her tone calm. "I'm not seeking revenge. I want a society that knows when to say, enough." She didn't blame Karen for her past, but she couldn't accept that being hurt gave someone the right to hurt others. Still, the public began to shift. An article from the Patriot American Voice read, "Veteran charged simply for protecting her child, a victim of a cold judicial system." Online the comments rolled in. "How do we know Renee's telling the full story? I'd react too if someone touched my kid. Karen's strong. Maybe she just snapped under pressure." Another example of the system jailing black mothers instead of helping them heal. Renee read them all. She didn't respond, but something crept into her chest. Something even she couldn't name. A flicker of doubt about what was truly right. One afternoon she visited her pastor, the same man who had helped guide her through her divorce years earlier. "I don't know anymore," Renee said. "I thought I was doing the right thing. But if my version of justice means putting someone like her behind bars, am I punishing her just because she's suffered more than me?" The pastor looked at her quietly, then replied, "Justice is not revenge. It's saying, this must not happen again. And compassion? It doesn't need permission. Just the right moment." Across town, Karen sat alone. She looked into the mirror, placed a hand over her chest, the spot where her military insignia once lay, and whispered, "I lost control. I really lost control." For the first time, Karen didn't blame anyone. Not Renee. Not the officers. Only herself. March 28, 2024, Orange County Courthouse, Florida. The clock above the judge's bench struck 9 a.m. Renee Martin entered the courtroom in a simple navy blue suit, holding a printed transcript of witness statements. Her face was calm, not hardened, but radiating strength after weeks of silence. Across the aisle, Karen Holloway was escorted in, her hair now loose, no longer in the military bun. She walked slowly, not because of chains, but because of the invisible weight she carried, her past, her children, and a justice she wasn't sure she still recognized. Judge Jackson entered. "We begin today's proceedings. This is the official trial of the state of Florida versus Karen Holloway on 3 counts. This court will determine guilty or not guilty." The prosecution called its first witness, Renee Martin. She took the stand, didn't look at Karen, but didn't avoid her either. Her voice was steady, each word owned by truth. "I was the one attacked. I was in my assigned seat. I didn't yell, I didn't provoke. I simply asked a child to step aside. I lost a tooth. I still can't eat solid food. But worse than the pain was the look in those children's eyes. The ones who saw violence from someone who should have been teaching them calm. Defense attorney Harris stood to cross-examine. Miss Martin, you've worked in law, haven't you? You know how prosecution works? Yes. Then you're also aware that extreme reactions can come from trauma? I am, Renee said, locking eyes with Harris. But if we keep using the past to excuse the present, no one will ever be accountable. Next witness, the flight attendant. She confirmed Karen was the aggressor, that she had intervened and got scratched in the process as both women became entangled. Another witness, a law student passenger, testified, I saw Renee get hit first. There was blood. She didn't strike back. It all happened in 10 seconds. Fast, but very clear. Karen remained silent until the judge asked, does the defendant wish to speak? The courtroom went completely still. Karen stood. She looked at the judge, then, for the first time, slowly turned to face Renee. I was wrong, not because the court says so, but because I see it every night when I watch my children sleep. I'm sorry. No apology will ever be enough. And I'm not saying it to lessen my guilt. I say it because I lost the best part of myself that day, on that plane. Renee said nothing, but her eyes filled with tears. A second later, she looked away. The judge left the courtroom to deliberate. 15 minutes later, she returned. The court finds the defendant, Karen Holloway, guilty of misdemeanor battery. She will not face criminal charges. However, she is required to complete 12 months of mandatory psychological counseling, community service, and restitution for the plaintiff's medical expenses. There was no applause. No one cried. But something lifted in the room. Not because someone won, but because two women had chosen to stand on the side of humanity, even from opposite sides. After the trial, a reporter approached Renee. Do you feel that justice was served? Renee replied, her voice low but firm. Justice isn't always about jail time. Sometimes it's when someone chooses not to strike back with their hands or their heart. Karen said nothing to the press. She just went home, held her children a little longer than usual, and for the first time she opened the journal she had long left untouched. On the first page she wrote, the day I realized being a mother doesn't always make me right, but being an adult means I must be accountable. 2 months after the trial, Renee Martin stood in front of a classroom of high school students in St. Louis. On the board, Respect in Public Spaces, a workshop for the future. She wasn't a teacher, she wasn't a famous speaker, but today she taught from what she had lived through. We can't control other people's anger, but we can control our response. I used to think silence was weakness, but choosing not to retaliate, that's a kind of strength no one teaches you. She shared her story. Not Karen's name, not the punch, but the choice to let a wrong action end there or to let it spiral into a chain of mistakes. At the same time, across town, at a veterans support center on the west side of St. Louis, Karen Holloway was setting up chairs for a PTSD therapy group. No one knew she had been tried for assault. No one asked. She wasn't a social victim. She wasn't the angry mom. She was just Karen, a woman relearning how to speak with herself. After every session, she wrote in her journal, I'm learning that yelling doesn't make people listen, it just makes them afraid. One afternoon, her eldest son, Malik, walked into the room holding a piece of paper. Mom, I wrote about you. The assignment was, the bravest person I know. Karen nearly cried. Not out of pride, but because someone still saw the good in her, even when she had forgotten it was there. Social media had long moved on. The hashtag #12 incident was no longer trending, but in a quiet corner of the community, a small group of women began hosting circles on public conflict. Spaces where everyone had the right to be heard and to learn. An education startup invited Renee to collaborate on a new program, Safe Voices, teaching nonviolent response skills in airports, supermarkets, and schools. Change didn't come from the top, it came from the deepest place, the hearts of those who had once been hurt and chose not to hurt others in return. February 11th, 2025, 1 year after the incident. Renee received a hand-addressed envelope with no name. Inside, a handwritten note in shaky script. I can't go back and undo what I did, But because of you, I know there's still something I can learn, something I can forgive, and something I can teach my kids. I'm trying. Every day. Thank you for not striking back. Thank you for doing what I wasn't strong enough to do in that moment. Renee folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. No one needed to know. No headlines, no perfect ending. Just a silence deep enough to hear, and a tomorrow that doesn't repeat what yesterday broke. In an age where everything is recorded, posted, and judged by 1,000 keyboards, one thing never changes: our personal choice in the face of anger. This story isn't just about Renee or Karen. It's about all of us, walking into public spaces, carrying invisible wounds, and sometimes letting them choose for us. If you believe that one story can change how we see one another, if you believe in justice, compassion, and the power of truth, subscribe to never miss the everyday stories that shake us to the core. And leave a comment if you've ever been in a similar situation. You might be Renee, you might be Karen, or just someone who watched it happen. But if there's one thing worth sharing today, it's this: kindness doesn't need to be caught on camera, but it always leaves a mark.